Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today, I want to talk about what it's like to work with other people who know who I am. This is actually a funny question. I will read the final question. There was a long preamble, but I'll read you the question I got on the channel. Do you find a lot more respect in your projects these days? Or do people go, who are you when working with your gaming celeb ass? Okay. It's funny. I laughed when I read this, not because it's a funny question, but because I've had funny experiences. And I don't I don't see myself any different than when I started when I was 16 years old. I liked games then. I like them now. I enjoyed making them then. I enjoy making them now. Yes, I have more experience, which basically just translates into having more tools in my tool chest. And I have a good idea of things that'll work and things that won't work. But I still get surprised when myself or another designer tweaks an existing feature and it gets a lot better. I still like thinking about features that have fallen out of favor. I find it ironic now that turn based used to be popular and then it went through a period where everyone thought it was dumb and now it's becoming popular again. Who knew? I will say that early on in my career, I found that journalists, when they came to projects I was on, often asked to speak to me. It turns out I spoke in good sound bites, is what they called it. Or as one of the PR managers told me, she said, when someone asks you a question, you give a very succinct, easy to quote answer. And I'm like, well, good, great. This sometimes made other people on the team angry because they felt like they weren't being listened to when the journalists would talk to us. It got to the point where at one point a journalist came and I didn't say anything. I didn't answer any questions because I was like, I'm going to let other people on the team answer this. And one of the guys who complained to me literally didn't open his mouth the whole interview. And later on, the PR manager came over and she was so mad at me. She goes, why didn't you answer those questions? And I'm like, I'm trying to let the team answer them. Let us all have, a time at bat. And she was funny. She said, I don't encourage that. I said, people want a face. People want someone who's responsible. She even gave me an example. Warren Spector, even though he has a team and he doesn't do all the work on his projects, he's often brought up as the face of a project. And he himself in interviews has said that frequently he is attributed for things he didn't do. But this is kind of how the industry works. The irony is, probably until doing this channel, most people would not know who I was if they passed me by, even at a game conference. I've gone to a lot of game conferences. No one knew who I was. The only time I ever got asked questions was after doing a talk. Then people knew, oh, that's Tim. Sometimes after that talk or after another talk, they'd come up to me and say, hey, I want to ask you a question. And that was fun. I know about a little more than 10 years ago, I did a PAX panel that Brian Mitsoda set up. And I was excited to do it because there was someone else in the panel that I had a book of his I wanted him to sign. And I went up before the talk and I sat my stuff down we all had name tags on our chairs. I sat my stuff down. I said, hey, I'm Tim Kaine. Really excited to meet you. I'd love if you could sign this book. And he just went, oh, I'll sign it, but I usually do these after the talks. And he signed it. And I put it back in my book bag and I started to sit down. He goes, whoa, 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 this is a round table. We're about to do a talk here. You need to sit in the audience. And I sat down in my assigned seat and I said, no, this is me. And I guess he was suitably embarrassed, but it was just funny that I said who I was when I walked up. Anyway, to get back to the original question, I've worked with all kinds of people. I will start with the most common, then talk about a couple more, and then talk about my favorite. So when I work with a group, there's usually four kinds of people I work with. The first group either don't know or don't care what I've done. And that's fine. I not everybody knows every game that's ever come out in the history of the game industry. It does make me wonder though when people work on particular genres that they haven't played the previous genres and kind of known what they've done. I don't care that they don't know who I am, but they should at least know like the difference between attributes and perks and skills and traits, and kind of know what these things are and how they're used in different games. Because Fallout didn't invent all of those, and a lot of games came out before, and a lot of games came out since that use them. So you should know what they are. I also don't mind mentioning when I'm in a group like that, hey, I tried something similar like this in the past, so I ran into these problems. Because you know what? I've worked with a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me. And I'm like, maybe this group can figure out the problems I ran into and avoid the issues. Great. Second group of people I worked with, they know who I am and they care too much. It's really hard to brainstorm with people who think that all your ideas are brilliant, because you basically can't get feedback. You'd be sitting at a table and you go, well, I think we should do this. They're like, yes, let's do that. I'm like, oh, well, we'll have to make sure we don't do this. We'll make sure of that. It's, when you want to bounce an idea back and forth, you just want to do that. That's why I like working with Charlie Staples, who was the lead designer on Outer Worlds with me. You could bounce back ideas back and forth with him. That's why I love working with Leonard. You pick any topic and he and I will bounce ideas back and forth. We don't care if it's something we've discussed before. We'll discuss it again. It might be something new, or it might be, hey, someone had an idea of how to tweak this. We should talk about it. Third group of people I've worked with are people who seem deliberately disrespectful. I don't care if people don't know or care who I am, but if they know and then they act kind of, I don't know what to say. It's weird to think of, but they act entitled about me having a history of making games. If you want to see examples, look at the ageism video I did. I'll link it below. I've encountered people who, they know who I am, and they seem to bend over backwards to say that either my experience is too ancient, or it's not applicable to what we're doing here, or my favorite one that people roll out, no one does that anymore. First of all, they do. People just like to say that when they can't think of a way of supporting their own idea. They're like, well, no one does that anymore. Sometimes I think that on some projects I had to prove that, yes, my experience is still relevant, which is annoying because it doesn't feel like something that's, I don't feel like I should have to prove over and over again, hey, I know what I'm doing here. But I'm not just talking with team members. That happens with every new project I'm on. Every time I come up with an idea, there's always somebody, sometimes at the publisher, sometimes in administration above me, and they're like, oh, you sure about that? You sure you want to do that? Well, I was thinking maybe we should do this other thing. And I'm like, well, those other ways have issues, and I don't know how to solve them. So if you want us to do this, you're going to have to come up with a solution for that. And I've had people go, no, that's your job. And I'm like, then I'm going to do this thing that I want to do if it's my job. My favorite people to work with is the fourth group. These are people who are familiar with the work I've done, are doing similar things in their games, and either want to avoid pitfalls or they want to extend the feature in some new and novel way, and they want to explore it, in discussion, and talk about pros and cons and how it compares to lots of other ways that feature has been done in the past, so that they can kind of hash this out before it goes to a programmer and the feature gets somewhat locked into the game. Because as I've talked about, the way you end up in crunch is you code something too early, and either it takes longer than you think, or you finally get finished and it's not fun, or it interacts strangely with other features in the game, or whatever. Or it has to be optimized, just things that are hard to predict. So you kind of want to get as much of your design done up front. It's why I love brainstorming sessions. I love that people will talk pros and cons. And that's what I love about this fourth group, is when I work with someone who knows what I've done and want to talk about those things. And I'm even fine when they go, hey, I know you did this in your game, but it kind of caused this problem. I'm like, yes, it did. We never figured out how to solve this. And I love when they go, what if you tried this? Because sometimes my response is, where were you 20 years ago? Because I've heard some really great ideas from new designers, but often it's new designers who've looked at past work. It's like, if you're going to be a writer, you probably want to read and see what's been done. So that's what I really like working with is those people. But I'm also fine with the first group. If you don't know who I am and you don't care, I don't mind. I just want to be able to talk about ideas with other designers and flesh them out. That's what I think is important. So, no, I don't feel like a celebrity game designer, and I certainly don't think I act like a celebrity game designer. It's only when people act that way and are weird about it that it's ever really come up in games I've done. And luckily, like now that I'm contracting, I tend to mostly get people from Group 4. They know who I am. They want to take advantage of that experience, and they have new ideas that they want to bounce off and go, hey, what problems do you think this is going to cause us? Spent hour and a half this morning doing that exact thing with a client, and it was fun and it was great, and I think they were happy afterwards because some of their new ideas are really good. But I just said, hey, make sure you do this, this, and this other thing before you send it off to the programmers and then hand it out to level designers as here's a feature you've got to take into account. Whew. Anyway, it's fun to do that kind of work, and I don't mind if people know what I've done in the past. In fact, it's nice.